Hello, welcome to another entry in the Barrel Vision Spotlight series. This entry is on the Lead Storm powered minigun, which is the first primary weapon that any gunner will get their hands on. It is unsurprisingly in keeping with the theme of gunner and is really the launchpad for the theme of gunner. It's sort of the identity springboard of, well, it's the springboard for his identity of big guns that weigh £4,000. I don't know what the quote is. So it's just going to be an overview / review of this lovely weapon. And I say lovely because I'm a big fan of the minigun. It's the three gunner primaries always vying for my top spot. I'd say the Hurricane is less of a competitor because of its uses are much more specific. The minigun is a weapon that's kind of always good, or it's difficult to make it bad. There's only really one overclock that makes it objectively bad, and even though it's one of the more interesting ones. But the minigun's sort of mainstay, its point, as it were, is mid to long range sustained DPS, and this sort of combination of traits is what makes it suited to pretty much every scenario. Every scenario except hard AoE, which it just kind of can't do. With one exception, of course. But being a mid to long range sustained DPS means it's great for picking off just general trash like grunts and spitters, and it's great at single target damage, Praetorians, oppressors, and boss targets. It's useful against all of those things. It's just not great against massive hordes of enemies. You can still pick off a lot of enemies, but not very quickly, which is why I don't think the minigun is suited to close range, especially because it lacks a hard AoE component and is very precise, unlike the Thunderhead and the Hurricane, which aren't as precise, especially the Thunderhead, and have built-in hard AoE, meaning that they can be used effectively at close range. It's obviously something to take note of that the minigun has technically the most ammo in the game by numbers. Even if its ammo is technically half of what is displayed, you still cannot surpass that number, at least in what is displayed, as in the minigun's base ammo is actually 1,200. I think you can surpass this with whatever that overclock on the Drac is called, where you get ammo back when you overheat. I think you can get over 1,200, but obviously you can go to 1,500. So the minigun pretty much always has the most ammo in the game, which is why it's so good at sustained DPS, because you just have so many damn bullets, which is another one of its strengths. It's very difficult to overkill when you have so many bullets, because it's essentially a beam, and you can just stop firing once you've killed the target, you know. The Thunderhead, it doesn't really overkill either, but you know, the Hurricane, for example, jet fuel homebrew, you know, a single shot will do most of a grunt's health, but most of, and you have to use 2 to kill the grunt. It's just quite upsetting. The minigun really avoids scenarios like that because it's much lower damage per shot, and you just have a lot more shots, so you have a lot more control over how much ammo you use to take care of an enemy. The exception to this is when using it at long range, because the minigun doesn't really have a charge up. Well, actually, no, it kind of does. It has a very short spin up time that you have to take into account, but then it also takes time to reach maximum accuracy, which means if your target is beyond mid-range, there's a high chance that you will waste a couple bullets, maybe a few dozen bullets even, before you actually start hitting your target, which is definitely a drawback of the minigun. It's something to consider when using it. It's something to consider when you're going for long range, but it's still a good long range option because of the sustained DPS and high accuracy that it can achieve. So while it is difficult to use too much ammo on an enemy, you can still end up wasting a fair bit of ammo trying to get on target in the first place. So the minigun is something that feels good in pretty much every scenario, although I understand that its playstyle does not suit everyone, but I think pretty much every playstyle can be accounted for when we look at the minigun's mod selection. Oh dear, that's not what... It's just fucking embarrassing, man. It's almost a trend of these videos. I do something stupid. This is what I was meant to show. Really, I think the minigun has probably one of the most nuanced mod selections in the entire game. There's nothing insane going on here. The 5th tier mods are fairly interesting. But like I said, there's nothing insane going on here. It's just every tier, there's great capacity for choice. It's always a choice. Every mod is competitive. I'd say perhaps maybe not this one as much. Fire rate and accuracy are much more valuable than whatever this has to offer. But apart from that, these are very competitive. Having the ammo is nice because you got more to work with, but the damage is also extremely valuable and better for DPS, because you can't always force the ammo out of the gun in a way that is useful. So damage is always something that I consider. Armor breaking makes it feel fantastic against pretty much everything when it comes to direct damage, because you don't always have to be hitting a weak point to be doing good damage. Stun is always great, especially increased stun chance. Gives it much more stopping power, much more potent against crowds and just bigger targets like wardens and Praetorians. Bigger targets that can still be stunned. And then of course blow through, very useful, amazing, one of the best mods on it, but I think these two still compete. It just makes it feel much better against crowds. It's just it has potential to be very useful. These 3 mods, once again, very competitive. These 2 I think more so. Spin down time. So this mod here increases how long the minigun stays at max stability. Okay, plus 1 second spin down time, which means you won't have to spin up for longer after stopping firing. So you can stop firing and start firing again within a longer span of time. You can wait a little bit longer, as in you won't always have to spin up again. And tier 5, I'll cover in more detail on the individual videos, but these are also really good stuff here. I personally don't find these 2 to be anywhere nearly as valuable as hot bullets, but I do see the value. Cold to the Grave is fantastic, especially for something like Lead Storm. Aggressive Venting pairs well with... glad I paused it for that. Aggressive Venting, like I said, pairs somewhat well with Burning Hell because you heat up faster, but I think it's even more valuable. I think this has even more value for Burning Hell. I'm not a big fan of aggressive venting on the minigun. I'm a much bigger fan of it on the plasma carbine, but I still see its use. Yeah, there's really choice in every tier. It's not as obvious. I think that does definitely apply to gunners' weapons in general, actually. Gunners' primaries, there's always choice. There's always good and bad. Well, not always bad options, I mean. They're all good options, I'm saying, except this because it's bugged. Armor breaking on the Hurricane. Don't use it, it's bugged. So yeah, just an extremely well-rounded, versatile weapon. The only thing it lacks is hard AoE, which, like I said, can be somewhat accounted for. So let's talk overclocks. Overclocks generally all very good. Exception being Bullet Hell, which is just bad and goofy. You can use it, it's fun to use, but it's not fun when you're doing it so terribly. My main criticism of the minigun's overclocks, however, that it does not share with the mods, is there's a fair bit of overlap. I mean, look at these logos. We've got damage, damage, damage. We've got ammo and ammo. It's not all that interesting, although there is definitely... Once again, it's more like these are 3 upgrades in the same tier, say the damaged ones. There's reason to take all of them, in my opinion, especially with this having decreased spin-up time. I actually really like this one. I generally go for these 2. I'm not a big fan of Lead Storm, personally. I don't like what it takes away. Ammo mod's also very competitive. Actually, no. Thin drummed walls isn't really in the discussion, unfortunately. It doesn't really serve much of a purpose. If you want ammo, it's always worth using this. Even though you lose rate of fire, you still have good rate of fire, and you can take the rate of fire mod, because the base accuracy is serviceable. But of course, there is Burning Hell, which is the AoE option, and it is a potent one, right? It's not like, oh, you want to do AoE with your gunner primary, just use one of the other ones. It's not as simple as that. Burning Hell, it's one of the most potent close range AoE effects in the game. And that's also another area where it shines. It covers that weakness of close range, which the minigun doesn't handle particularly well. And obviously, everyone knows how well it pairs with volatile bullets on the Bulldog. The only problem is, it doesn't really increase your stopping power. Yes, you set things on fire very quickly, but you do have to be quite close to them, and you don't necessarily kill them that quickly. Certainly not quick enough to stop them from getting hits in on you. So you do have to play very carefully with Burning Hell, but it is still extremely, extremely powerful. It also feels very good with not all of Gun's secondaries, I should say. The Bulldog feels great. You've got the magic bullets AoE that can cover for the minigun's AoE weaknesses. You've got volatile bullets, which is an amazing combo. It generally pairs very well with the coil gun for me. I've actually found that those two are probably my favourite pairing of weapons, maybe in the game. I just love using the coil gun and the minigun together. But the Burt not so much, because the Burt really doesn't do anything that the minigun can't do. The Burt really is just a minigun. It's a substitute minigun. So you can sort of get the same sustained DPS sort of function, but for your secondary, which obviously means it's not quite as good as it could be. So my general take on the minigun is that it is definitely one of the best weapons in the game. Easily A tier, potentially S tier. Its weakness is, well, what it lacks is very present, but can easily be accounted for, and it makes up for it in how good it is at what it is meant to be good at. That being sustained DPS, which covers for mopping up stragglers and good single target damage. It doesn't have to be a wave clearer to be a good weapon, and the minigun really proves that. The only thing I would want for it is not necessarily to change any of these overclocks. Maybe bullet hell needs some love, but even if they're basic, they're fine the way they are, and there's reasons to use them all, even if they're all quite similar. And of course, Burning Hell stands on its own ground. The only thing I'd really like to see is an overclock that goes in for rate of fire and accuracy, which is actually what I put together for the final pitch video for the overclock workshop, which you'll see eventually. Once we're done with Scout, it'll be the second video after that in that series. But apart from that, I have almost nothing bad to say about the minigun. That won't be the same for every weapon. Next week will be the flamethrower. I'll definitely have criticisms there. Not next week, next episode will be the flamethrower, for which I will have some definitive criticisms. Be prepared for that. I'll still be mostly positive on it, but yeah. Lead Storm powered minigun. The good one. See you next time.